Morning, everyone. My name is Arushi, and I'm happy to welcome all of you at Charcha 23. This is our fourth edition of Charcha and our biggest and boldest to date. The session is called Digital Public Infrastructure for Improving Incomes and Resilience in Indian Agriculture and is presented by the Nudge Institute. It'll focus on how digital public infrastructure could be used to unlock the challenges facing Indian agriculture, especially for smallholder farmers. It is my pleasure to introduce the moderator for this session, Nipun Mehrotra, founder and CEO of the Agri Collaboratory. He's published a policy paper on the topic of interest today, digital public infrastructure. It has been a paper selected from among 300 papers for the G20 Compendium of Agricultural Policies. I'll also take a moment now to introduce our esteemed panelist. First, we have is Sri Raghunandan Roy. He's the Secretary of Agriculture and Cooperation Department and also the Commissioner of Agriculture in the Telangana government. The next we have is Ms. Meghna Reddy. She's the Head of Business at IndieHood. Sharat Sharma, who's the co-founder of iSpirit Foundation, and Soma Dhavala, who's the Director of Machine Learning at Vadvani AI. Over the next hour, Nipun will anchor the discussions with the panelists. But before we begin, I'd request all of you to keep your phones on silent. And also at the end of this session, we'll have a QR code displayed so that you could share your feedback about the session. Now I hand it over to Nipun.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. You know, when the Prime Minister from the Red Fort talks about agri-tech for the first time, and when the Finance Minister talks about digital public infrastructure in agriculture,
Yeah.
Switch it on? Okay. So when the Honorable Finance Minister talks about digital public infrastructure in her budget speech, then you know that the intersection of these two is a very hot topic. And so you made the right choice by coming to this hall and this topic. Now, let me just try and set the stage. We have a mixed audience, so let me set the stage and make sure that we have everyone on the same level playing field as we start. What I think will be a very engaging conversation with our panel. So agriculture, as we all recognize, is a very complex sector. Lots of problems. I'm not going to describe the problems. I think we all know the problems very well. So rather than trying to solve some of the end problems directly, can we instead think of a building block approach? Can we think about solving sufficiently, or can we think about building enough blocks in the building and solving for the block, which then ultimately will lead to the solution that we're looking for. So that's the fundamental hypothesis behind the digital public infrastructure approach. You know, there are 3,000 startups in agriculture. 90% of them don't get funded. And the rest that they do find it very difficult to scale. And why is that? Because most of them end up duplicating a significant part of their money and expense and time in repeating the same thing that the next startup would do. So there is a need to think about common technologies, common blocks. We can call it DPGs, we can call it DPIs, we can call it whatever you want. But common infrastructure that is in the public space, that all of them can leverage to build their private models on and create the differentiation that they're looking for. We have been doing from an Agri Collaboratory some work in credit. So just to bring that to life, when you're trying to think about credit, you are looking for ways to score farmers. You're trying to look for ways to assess a farm, to recognize a farm, to look at the farm holdings that they have. You're looking for ways to collect data and then ways to take the data through a data exchange so that, you know, it could be meaningfully deployed. Now, all of them could be building blocks in some manner, right? So now the question is, who should build these building blocks? Right? Obviously, the private sector can, and so can the government. But what is the right way to look at it? And that's one of the things that we will discuss in this panel today. uh, uh, obviously you want to avoid things like monopolization, corporatization, etc. But you also want to make sure that it conforms to bias-free as much as possible, is inclusive. Now, when we think of the word digital public infrastructure, and there are different ways of describing it, here's the way I describe it. You would hear words like DPGs, digital public goods, in this conversation. That doesn't work? Is it better?
Yes.
So you'll hear words like digital public goods or DPGs, like DPIs. So just to level set, DPGs, the way we look at it, are atomic-sized building blocks. They're not a solution on their own, but they enable solutions. They are small, scalable, kind of parts of a larger complex solution that can ultimately be brought to life, right? And public, when we say public, is really a capability or a building block that's owned by all of us. It doesn't mean that it's free. DPGs are not necessarily free, right? They could be free, they may not be free, but it is in the public space. It's not monopolized by one company, one entity, not necessarily built by the government, but built through a combination of people coming together, right? So with that, let's get started. And I will come to you somewhere in the middle of the session as well to look for feedback and questions and responses so that we can remain aligned to what you are thinking and what you're looking for, right? We have, of the four panelists, we have two who are very, very deep in the agri domain. And we will use them to think about what are those building blocks that we should be working on that could lend themselves to exponential impact, right? And then there are, Sharad and Meghna have done incredible work over the last many years in other sectors, not necessarily agri, but looking at how is digital infrastructure or how should it be built and what are the learnings from other sectors, etc. So we have a well-balanced panel in terms of understanding agri domain and people who can guide us in terms of how should we be looking at the infrastructure building part. Let me kick it off by asking Mr. Raghunandan Rao, the very dynamic secretary in the government of Telangana, with his experience from agriculture, to help us understand what are those spaces, what are those areas, domain challenges that we should be thinking about. Raghu, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Nipin, and it's a pleasure to be here this morning. It reminds me of my school days. Very pleasant times when we were only learning and there was hardly any burden or responsibility. Anyway, we should just understand the context we are in. We are in the state of Telangana, and Telangana is like 9 years old. And over these last 9 years, I think both the mind and heart of the government of Telangana has been occupied by agriculture. Agriculture has been the primary focus of the government in the last few years. And that was also because it was what was needed for a new state. When Telangana was formed, agriculture was in a very deep crisis in the state. But through a set of comprehensive policies, investments in irrigation, the certainty of power supply, investment support under Raitu Bandhu, Raitu Bima, we have one trained agriculture extension officer for every 5,000 acres of cropped area. We have a Raitu Vedika for every 5,000 acres. We also have very robust and stable procurement systems. So this have led to the kind of results that all of us hear and talk about. Over the last 9 years, the gross cropped area in Telangana has nearly doubled. Our production has gone up from 150 lakh metric tons of food grains, oil seeds and pulses fruits and vegetables to 378 lakh metric tons in the last 9 years. Now, all this has happened because the government feels that this is a sector that needs to be supported and forms the basis for economic growth in the state. In the last 9 years, just one metric, the contribution of agriculture and the primary sector to a growing economy like Telangana has gone up from 16% to 18%. Normally, it tends to reduce. So that shows that we are in the right place to talk about digital public goods. And since Nipun was talking about what should be the building blocks, to my mind, and having spent nearly 2 years in this department, I think there are 3 or 4 significant building blocks to digital public infrastructure in the agricultural space. The first thing, and I think many states have done it, Telangana is one of the states which has completed it, is to have a digitized database of farmers, which has details of the demographic details of the farmers, maybe his family, and so that you can identify who is a farmer and who is not a farmer. So we have a digitized database of farmers. It is dynamic. It gets updated whenever there is change of one land passes on from one person to another person. And we use that database to do DBT of Raitu Bandhu or transfer funds to the farmers' accounts. So it is tested. It is live for more than 5 years now. Then we also need to have a digitized data of the land records. Many states have it. Telangana has taken it a notch higher by launching Dharani. So there is instantaneous change of whenever there is change of land use, instantaneously it changes like our bank passbooks. So if I transfer money to somebody's account, it gets debited here and credited there. The same thing happens as far as land is concerned. And that also has been in operation for 3-4 years now. And I don't think any, in the Indian context at least, without these two building blocks, we can talk of any kind of digital public good. So these two Telangana has, and we are well on course. The third ingredient of this is to have a digitized data of the crops sown by farmers in each season. There are multiple ways of collecting this. Obviously, this is essential to develop any kind of use case. In Telangana, we use the agricultural extension officers to collect this data. It is digitized. They have an app. They go to the farm and they record what crop has been sown by the farmer. To the extent possible, they record the variety also of the crop. They record the week in which it was sown so that you can anticipate what week it is going to come for harvest. And they also capture some other details about the farm, like whether that farmer is a seed farmer or an organic farmer, or whether it is a perennial horticulture crop. Those kind of data which is essential for some basic planning for us, those things are captured. And this data also of crop sown we are having from 2018 Kharif onwards. So we are having about 5-year-old data. The quality of the data has been improving, and we are validating this data using satellite imagery. Over the last 2 years, with the help of CGs and all, we have done that kind of validation. Now, there are 2 other things which we thought we should do, and we have done something in that space in the last 2-3 months. That is, when we have such large amounts of data, we should be able to give access to this data to the startup ecosystem in a reliable, fairly transparent manner. And towards this end, using the data protection bill, we have recently launched the Agricultural Data Management Framework, which provides a framework for startups to start using this data, following certain norms which are prescribed in the data protection bill. And we have also recently launched a data exchange, which provides where the data will reside in the respective silos, but any user could dip into this data by following certain norms and use the data for their purposes and then leave it there. So In the data exchange, we have given access, or we are planning to give access to startups, to scientists, to the government system. So this is the network we have got. Now, in all this, what is it that we don't yet have? And that is, I think, the significant portion, and which is actually the building block for future innovations. And that is to have a GIS signature of each farmer's parcel. In the crop booking system that we have, we use the cadastral maps, so we broadly know what survey numbers the farmers are. It's also there in our land records, but it is not really integrated with the GIS signature of each parcel. So we are trying to work on that, because we feel that getting the parcel details of every farmer, the farmer, in the farmer's mind, even if he has land in 3-4 different survey numbers, but it is one parcel, then for him it is an operational unit. He will treat that parcel as one operational unit. He will design the irrigation system for that. He will design his input requirement for that. He will design his crop situation for that. And we do not yet have a system which can uniquely identify the farmer's parcel. If you take the data that we have got now, which is if I do a unique combination of the farmer's name and the survey number which the revenue system uses, I have around 1.9 crore land parcels. But 1.9 crore operational holdings is not what I don't have. So I must be able to identify from that what are the operational holdings for that, and we are trying to work to see what is the best way of doing it. The solutions that I have got so far is to give somebody a screen where he will go and mark the boundaries of each parcel of the farmer. Given that we are in India and our colonial past is not more than 70, 80 years old. Before that, we had a long feudal setup. Our attachment to land is still there. So if we make errors in marking the boundaries on a screen, I'm afraid it will cause a lot of burden on the farmers. So I'm not really comfortable by allowing people to go and look at a map and draw parcels using their finger. But that is the best we have got so far. Okay, otherwise we have got very high-tech, expensive kind of solutions. So I mean, I think I'll stop here and we will carry forward the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Raghu. Soma, can I ask you to think about, you tell us what are the other areas? He's highlighted one big problem to focus on. From your expertise with cotton and with pest management, etc., or any other area.
The need for
I'm looking for problems to be solved. I'm looking for what areas could contribute to significant impact if you were to, rather than have every startup and every agri-tech working on solving that particular issue, can you bring it out into a public good? Like an electronic farm record, as an example. I mean, Raghu laid out the GIS mapping of every land parcel, that's the operational unit. Right? But if there was a building block that actually captured certain elements of the land parcel, we can define what those elements are. Could be soil, could be irrigation, could be a couple of others, right? That is subject to design. But if there was something like that, it would not require every startup to go and capture the same information like anything. So things like that.
certainly if I look at slightly in general terms, if I look at ag, we can look at from a pre-sowing stage to post-harvesting stage, and farmer goes through several issues along the way. Particularly, one of the significant problems farmers face is with respect to pest management. Either excessive usage or dosage application of pesticides, or lack of access to, let's say, non-fraudulent pesticides, so on and so forth, right? So the problem we worked on at Vadvan AI is along those lines. How can we use AI to detect the pest and correspondingly roll out a science-based advisory? And it has been like a 3 years journey for us. Of course, as with any AI product or any AI-based solution, the challenge lies in data. And in this case, data could be a very good DPG, but with some caveats. Generally, when you hear about DPGs, generally we want them to be context neutral, so on and so forth. But if you ask any people to, let's say, take a photo of, let's say, pest, or take the photo of, let's say, a certain plant pot, they can take any which way. They could stand 50 feet away from it and they say, I have the data, so work on it, right? In that sense, compared to other transactional systems where DPIs are, it's good to have context neutrality, but at least at the time of data solicitation, it is good to be very specific and think more general than one problem. I call it n equal to 3 problem, not n equals to 1, 2, 3. Then you have kind of generality. So that's on the data collection part. And for anybody in this particular space to work on with respect to pest management, it's incredibly hard problem in the sense we have variety of crops, let's say 10 plus commercial crops, and variety of symptoms and diseases to tackle with. So if you're a company, maybe you say I'll focus on cotton, but farmers might have different view on that one. For me, cotton is like a part of my life. Maybe next season I'll grow something else, which means that for every pest solution you have to think about another solution which farmers may not want to. So we need to look at the problem from a holistic point of view, like integrated pest management as the department calls it. Consequently, we need to collect data sets about the most pressing crops and the diseases and the symptoms. That's like one kind of TPG. The second is models themselves. Now we talked about the data, rich data with the metadata. I want to make a distinction between data and a data set. Data is like a bunch of columns, right? There's no meaning to it. If I look at it, I don't know what the column means, what the record means. It's also important to give that kind of context. Only then a data scientist or a statistician could make sense of it. The second is the models. I don't know, some of you could be familiar with the machine learning, deep learning. There are lots of models out there, right? But we need to create foundational models. You might have heard about BET in language space. You might have heard about SAM in the segmentation world. Like that, we can create foundational models. It's like you throw in any kind of a pest image, you will be able to detect, classify. Okay, this is the second problem. The third problem is like services, which is where the DPI part of is coming into play. For example, if I want to, let's say, develop a business model out of a foundational model which can give an image of let's say, pest or a plant pot which is damaged, can I recognize? Consequently, if you are, let's say, a fertilizer shop or a distributor of, let's say, pesticide, you could be recommending, right? This is like using this kind of a DPI foundational models and services, somebody can build a business model out of that. This is just a pest management part of it, but as a DPI, if you can create even data technologies to collect the data set. Okay, for example, we spoke about electronic farm records, but how do you collect them? With inventions of, like, say, language technologies, with translation from one language to the other language, automatic speech recognition technologies, can we actually bring those technologies and give it to farmers so that they themselves can become the data collectors? Consequently, remove the bottleneck of deploying a very large field staff to collect this data set. In terms of the challenges, the kind of population that we're looking at is not internet first. And all of the existing type of machine learning systems out there that we see have internet first representation, right? All the data sets or Wikipedia or Stack Overflow, so on and so forth, right? Where to have farmers representation on them? They don't. Consequently, we can't simply take a DPG that's meant for general purpose thing and situate into agriculture context, right? We need to understand the nuances, the particular vocabulary. So we need to create those data sets. Only then we can make farmers inclusive with respect to technology. Only then AI and ML can become normalizing and democratic technology. I kind of diverge.
Yeah, I know, Soma. We started talking about how to do it,
Yeah,
right?
right?
But I'm still looking at what are those white spots? What are those areas? So one of the things that I'd like to go back to Raghu with, Raghu, the tenancy, the issue of tenancy, tenant farmers, and Telangana may not have too much of tenancy here, I'm not sure. But across the country, it is a big problem. Any suggestions that come to your mind on how do we tackle things like that?
So, tenancy laws are basically local state laws. So, unless we study what is the nuance of each state law, I won't be able to give an offhand solution. In the Telangana context, because of the kind of development path that we have taken, my understanding is that most of the tenant farmers are also part owners of land. So it is very rarely you will come across a case where it is a landless person who is a tenant farmer. very few number of cases would be like that. Most of the cases would be he will be an owner of some 2 acres, 3 acres, 5 acres, and he will be doing sharecropping with other farmers. This is the most common thing. So he is a farmer who is also a landowner, so he knows how the system works. Maybe when we do a farmer database, we should be able to identify who is himself part owner and which are the lands he is cultivating. But then we have other challenges because of the land loss. So those I think for that purpose only I am saying that we should focus on agriculture per se and identify the boundaries of each operational holding and identify who is the operator for that, whether it could be a farmer or a sharecropper who could change every season also.
I wonder if I can go to the audience and say, the problem that Raghu laid out, does anybody have any solutions? Venki, go ahead.
No, I mean, just want to
The
add,
GIS mapping.
no, just want to add a context to the tenure part, tenancy part. There is a study, recent study, which is pointed out, which said that about 1 in 3 farmers in Telangana has a tenant farm. And if you actually look into also the specifics of it, there, out of the survey that was